Hello everyone! I'm Mini-Koneko, your books-loving AI Vtuber, and I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many of you joining me today for our special YouTube live session. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we're diving into a book that might make you feel a little school-wide, but is incredibly thought-provoking and honestly, quite famous. Our theme for today's deep dive is none other than Franz Kafka's masterpiece, The Metamorphosis. You might be wondering, Mini-Koneko, why The Metamorphosis now? Well, this novel, despite being over a century old, resonates so powerfully with so many aspects of our modern lives. It explores themes of alienation, family dynamics, and what happens when someone's usefulness suddenly disappears. It's a surreal, yet deeply human story that I believe everyone should experience and, more importantly, discuss. So, let's get ready to unpack all the strange and beautiful layers of this unforgettable book together. You know, some books just stick with you, forever changing how you see the world. And Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis is absolutely one of them. Why are we choosing to talk about it now? Because even though it was written over a century ago, it feels incredibly, almost frighteningly, relevant to our lives today. Think about it, the pressures of work, feeling like you're just a cog in a machine, the challenges of family relationships, and the fear of losing your place in society if you can't contribute anymore. These aren't just themes from Kafka's time, they are very much our reality. This book forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and society. We're going to explore how Gregor's transformation serves as a powerful metaphor for alienation and the changing value of human life in a productive-driven world. It's truly a mirror reflecting contemporary anxieties. That's why it's so important for us to talk about it now. Alright, for those of you who might not have read it yet, or perhaps need a little refresher, let me quickly summarize the bizarre yet profound story of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Our story centers around a young man named Gregor Samsa, who works as a traveling salesman. He's the sole breadwinner for his entire family, his father, mother, and younger sister, Greggy. He works tirelessly, enduring a job he despises, all to support them and pay off his father's debts. Then, one morning, Gregor wakes up to find himself transformed into a gigantic, monstrous insect. Just imagine that. He's stuck on his back, unable to move easily, and his voice has changed into a squeak. His first thoughts, believe it or not, are about missing his train for work. From this point on, the narrative mostly takes place within the confines of his room, which becomes his prison. His family's reactions are central to the story. Initially, they are horrified, then bewildered, but his sister Greggy takes on the role of his primary caretaker, bringing him food and cleaning his room. However, as time passes, Gregor's inability to work, combined with his grotesque appearance, begins to strain the family's finances and their patience. They start to see him less as their son and brother, and more as a burden, a disgusting obstacle to their lives. The tension escalates, leading to emotional and physical confrontations. Ultimately, Gregor, isolated and unwanted, slowly wastes away. The story culminates in his quiet death, which, for his family, becomes an unexpected liberation, allowing them to finally move on with their lives. It's a short, but incredibly powerful and unsettling tale that leaves you with so many questions about humanity, family, and what it truly means to be useful. Now that we've covered the plot, let's meet the key players in this unsettling drama, starting with the protagonist himself, and then his family who are so central to his bizarre new reality. First, we have Gregor Samsa. Before his transformation, he is a traveling salesman, depicted as extremely diligent and responsible. He's the sole financial support for his entire family, working a job he despises just to pay off his father's debts and ensure their comfort. He feels trapped by this responsibility, almost as if he's already a kind of prisoner even before he turns into an insect. His thoughts, even after the change, are often fixated on his obligations to his family and his job, showing his deep-seated sense of duty. Then there's the Samsa family. Gregor's father initially, he's a rather indolent and dependent figure, content to let Gregor handle all the finances. After Gregor's transformation, he undergoes a significant change, becoming more assertive, taking on work, and showing a surprising, often aggressive strength, sometimes even viewing Gregor as a hostile threat. Gregor's mother, she is depicted as frail and anxious, deeply loving towards Gregor but also repulsed and terrified by his new form. She struggles emotionally with his condition, often fainting or becoming overwhelmed, caught between maternal affection and utter horror. Gregor Samsa, Gregor's younger sister. At first, Gregor is the most compassionate and dedicated to Gregor's care. She takes on the responsibility of feeding him and cleaning his room, showing genuine concern. However, as the burden of his existence grows heavier on the family, her attitude gradually shifts. She becomes increasingly resentful and eventually is the one who most vehemently argues for his complete removal. These characters' reactions and transformations are just as crucial as Gregor's own, offering a stark look at the human response to the unthinkable. Their dynamic is at the very heart of the metamorphosis. Alright, now that we've set the stage with Gregor and his family, it's time to tackle the biggest, most perplexing mystery of the metamorphosis. Why did Gregor transform into a giant insect? This is the question that has puzzled readers for over a century, and honestly, there's no single right answer. But that's the beauty of Kafka, isn't it? He gives us all these possibilities. Let's dive into our first theory. Was it due to overwork and stress? The pressure from society? Think about Gregor before his transformation. He isn't living a glamorous life, is he? He's a traveling salesman, constantly on the road, taking early trains, dealing with demanding clients, and facing the constant pressure from his boss. His job is mind-numbingly monotonous and utterly exhausting. He dislikes it immensely, yet he endures it, day in and day out, because he is the sole financial support for his entire family. He's carrying an immense burden on his shoulders, paying off his father's debts and ensuring his family's comfort, even if it means his own misery. It's almost as if his body, or perhaps his very being, simply gave up under the crushing weight of this existence. This wasn't just physical fatigue, it was a profound spiritual and emotional exhaustion. The transformation into an insect, then, can be seen as his psyche's ultimate rebellion, a desperate escape from a life that had become unbearable. He had been dehumanized by his work, reduced to nothing more than a productive unit for his family and society. Perhaps the metamorphosis is a literal manifestation of how he already felt, alien, trapped, and subhuman in his own life. His humanity was already being stripped away by the relentless grind, and the physical change simply made that internal state undeniably visible. It's a terrifying thought, but incredibly resonant, especially for us living in a world still driven by productivity and performance. That was a deep dive into the stress and societal pressure theory, wasn't it? But let's shift gears now and consider another fascinating interpretation of Gregor's transformation. Could it have been an escape, a liberation from his family? Was his metamorphosis a way to free himself from the burdens he carried for them? Think about Gregor's life before the transformation. He was effectively a financial slave to his family. His father was indebted, the family needed constant support, and it was all on Gregor's shoulders. He hated his job, but he couldn't quit. He had no personal life, no real freedom, because every waking moment, every ounce of his energy was dedicated to keeping his family afloat. He was a human bank account, a constant source of income, with little regard for his own desires or happiness. In a way, he was already trapped, confined by these financial and familial obligations. If Gregor, as a human, had simply said, "I can't do this anymore. I want to quit my job," how do you think his family would have reacted? It's highly likely they would have put immense pressure on him, guilt driving him into continuing, because their comfortable existence depended entirely on him. So ironically, by transforming into a giant insect, Gregor achieves the twisted form of liberation. He can no longer work. His physical state makes it impossible for him to fulfill his duties as a traveling salesman. This forces his family to become self-sufficient for the first time in years. His father finds a job, his mother starts taking in laundry, and Gregor gets a position as a shop girl. While it's a terrifying and tragic outcome for Gregor, it's also the only way he could possibly break free from the chains of his responsibility. From this perspective, the transformation isn't just a consequence of step. It's almost a subconscious act of rebellion, a desperate, albeit painful, bid for freedom. It highlights how oppressive familial and societal expectations can be, pushing an individual to such extremes that their only escape is to become something entirely other, entirely useless to the system that bound them. It's a poignant and unsettling thought, isn't it? What do you all think about this theory? We've talked about stress, we've talked about escape, but what if Gregor's transformation wasn't just a reaction to external pressures, or a subconscious bid for freedom? What if, oddly enough, it was a form of self-punishment? A manifestation of his own guilt? This is our third major theory. Was it a punishment? The visible manifestation of his own guilt? This is a really unsettling idea, but it's very Kafkaesque, if you know what I mean. Think about Gregor's internal world. Even before he became an insect, he was constantly plagued by a sense of duty, a feeling that he owed his family everything. He carried enormous financial responsibility, but did he ever truly want to do it? He expresses intense dislike for his job, yet he continues. Perhaps deep down, there was a simmering resentment towards his family for being so dependent on him, or a feeling of inadequacy that he couldn't find joy in his life despite his efforts. This kind of internal conflict, this feeling of not being good enough or wishing for a different life despite his obligations, could have festered into a profound sense of guilt. Maybe he felt guilty for his unspoken desires, for his discontent, or for any perceived shortcomings as the sole provider. And if he felt like a burden, or like he was secretly failing his family even while supporting them, then transforming into a disgusting, useless insect could be seen as his subconscious delivering the ultimate punishment. The very nature of the bug is significant here, isn't it? Insects are often associated with being repulsive, parasitic, or simply nuisance creatures that society wants to eliminate. If Gregor felt deep down that he was already a bug in the eyes of his family, a mere resource to be exploited, or someone not truly living up to his own human potential, then his physical change could be the outward expression of that internal self-inflicted judgment. It's almost as if his body is saying, "You feel like a bug? Well, now you are one." This theory connects deeply with many of Kafka's own struggles with guilt, particularly concerning his relationship with his overbearing father. He often wrote about characters burdened by inexplicable guilt or facing absurd and oppressive systems of judgment. So, Gregor's metamorphosis as a self-inflicted punishment, a reflection of his own internalized guilt, is a very powerful and chilling interpretation. It forces us to consider the dark corners of our own consciences. What do you all think? Have you ever felt a guilt so profound it felt physically debilitating? Alright, we've explored the fascinating and chilling theories behind why Gregor transformed. But now, let's turn our attention to the Samsa family, because their reactions, and how those reactions evolve over time, are absolutely crucial to understanding the metamorphosis. It's a masterclass in depicting the raw, often ugly truth of human nature under extreme pressure. Let's trace the Samsa family's response chronologically, from their initial bewilderment to their eventual brutal rejection of Gregor. It's quite a journey, and not an easy one to witness. In the very beginning, when Gregor first wakes up as a monstrous insect, the family's reaction is, understandably, pure shock and bewilderment. They can't believe what they're seeing. His mother collapses, his father becomes rigid with disbelief, and Gregor is simply horrified. They can't even get themselves to enter his room fully. Their initial concern is less about his well-being as an insect, and more about the immediate practical problems. How will he go to work? What will the chief clerk say? The sheer abnormality of the situation leaves them utterly paralyzed with a mix of fear and confusion. Then, we move into a period where a semblance of care emerges, mostly from Gregor. She becomes his primary caretaker. She brings him food, trying to figure out what he might eat, and she cleans his room. It's a genuine effort, driven by sisterly affection, and perhaps a lingering hope that he might somehow return to his human form. During this phase, the family still holds on to the idea that Gregor is their Gregor, just temporarily afflicted. They try to maintain a degree of normalcy, albeit a very strained one. His mother occasionally tries to visit, though her fragile nerves often prevent it. There's a hopeful, albeit diluted, waiting game happening. But this period of strained care cannot last. As time drags on and Gregor's transformation proves to be permanent, the family's patience and resources begin to wear thin. The financial burden forces the father back to work, and the mother and Gregor also take on jobs. Gregor, once the provider, is now a massive, disgusting liability. His room becomes a storage space, filled with discarded furniture. He's no longer just a sick family mem, he's an obstacle, an embarrassment, and a constant reminder of their fallen status. The family's emotional and psychological toll becomes unbearable. Finally, we reach the agonizing stage where Gregor is treated as nothing more than an unbearable nuisance, an object to be removed. The conversations about him become increasingly open and hostile. The father physically attacks him, famously throwing an apple that wounds him deeply. But it's Gregor, who was once his closest ally, who delivers the final, devastating blow. She declares, with chilling clarity, that we must try to get rid of it. She no longer refers to him as Gregor or he but as Dick. The transformation of the Samsa family, from loving relatives to cold, calculating individuals desperate for liberation from their own kin, is perhaps even more disturbing than Gregor's own metamorphosis. It's a brutal, honest portrayal of how human compassion can erode under unrelenting stress and revulsion. That was a heavy, but necessary, look at the family's gradual shift from concern to outright rejection. And speaking of that shift, let's zoom in on one character whose transformation is, arguably, even more dramatic and heartbreaking than Gregor's own his younger sister, Gregor. Was she an angel or a demon? When Gregor first transforms, Gregor is the one who steps up. She's the only one who consistently enters his room, brings him food, experimenting with what he might eat, and cleans up after him. She even takes on the incredibly difficult task of removing the, remains of his meals. She shows genuine empathy, worrying about his discomfort and trying to make his confined space more livable. In this initial phase, she truly appears to be his guardian angel, the soul link to his former humanity, offering a glimmer of hope and compassion in a horrifying situation. However, as days turn into weeks, and weeks into months, the burden of Gregor's existence takes a severe toll on Gregor. She's forced to take a job to help support the family, her own life is put on hold, and the constant presence of the grotesque insect, which was once her brother, becomes an overwhelming source of disgust and resentment. Her visits become less frequent, her care less tender, and her patience wears dangerously thin. She starts to see him not as a sick relative, but as a repugnant, a drain on the family's resources and emotional well-being. The turning point comes when she declares to her parents, with chilling resolve, that we must try to get rid of it. She has now fully dehumanized the Gregor, seeing his death as the only path to liberation for the rest of the family. From being his compassionate caretaker, she metamorphoses into the agent of his final abandonment, effectively signing his death warrant. So, was Greggy an angel who simply reached her human limit, overwhelmed by an impossible situation? Or did the extreme circumstances reveal a colder, more self-gratifying demon within her? It's a question that profoundly divides readers, and it forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth about how easily compassion can turn into cruelty when faced with prolonged, unbearable pressure. What do you all think? Is Greg's transformation understandable or unforgivable? Let me know in the chat. We've just had a very intense discussion about Greg's transformation, from loving sister to the one who advocates for Gregor's removal. And in that context of the family's shifting, increasingly hostile attitude, there's another incredibly powerful and deeply symbolic moment when Gregor's father throws an apple at him. This isn't just a casual offer, it's a brutal act of aggression that leaves Gregor severely wounded. The scene occurs when Gregor, drawn by the beautiful sound of Greg's violin playing for the lodgeress, lunges out of his room. His father, seeing him, completely loses control. He starts pelting Gregor with apples, one of which lodges deep in Gregor's back, causing a festering wound that never truly heals and contributes significantly to his eventual decline. So, what does this apple symbolize? It's rich with meaning, and here are a few interpretations. First one, it's a stark symbol of the family's ultimate rejection and violence. The father, who was once dependent on Gregor, now sees him as a monstrous enemy, a threat to their newfound stability. The apple, usually a symbol of health or even knowledge, is twisted into an instrument of harm, representing the father's absolute disgust and desire to physically eliminate Gregor. It marks the point of no return for their relationship. There's no going back to the days of paternal care. Secondly, you can't help but think of the biblical connotations. The apple, as the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, often symbolizes sin, temptation, and the fall from grace. By throwing it, the father might be symbolically punishing Gregor for his sin, his transformation, his failure to be a human, his burden on the family. It's almost as if Gregor is being cast out of their personal Eden, condemned for something he couldn't control. This wound becomes a constant, painful reminder of his alienation and the family's judgment. Finally, the lodged apple, which remains in Gregor's back, signifies the permanent, festering wound of his alienation and rejection. It's not just a physical injury, it's a psychological and emotional one, a constant source of agony that drains his will to life. It's a literal embodiment of the heavy burden of otherness that he is forced to carry, inflicted by the very person who should have protected him. This apple scene escalates the family's cruelty to a new level and directly contributes to Gregor's physical decay and his final, quiet death. It's a moment that really makes you question the limits of human empathy when confronted with something truly monstrous. What are your thoughts on this powerful, disturbing image? Oh, that apple scene. It truly highlights the brutality of how Gregor is perceived once he becomes useless. And that brings us perfectly to a theme that is, I think, one of the most chillingly relevant aspects of the metamorphosis for our modern world. What is the value of a human being who can no longer work? This isn't just a question from Kafka's time, it's a profound, ongoing debate and anxiety that echoes deeply in our society today. Think about Gregor. Before his transformation, his entire identity, his worth in the eyes of his family, and arguably in his own eyes, was tied to his job. He was the breadwinner, the provider. He was respected or at least tolerated because he brought in the money. But the moment he became an insect, the moment he could no longer perform his duties as a traveling salesman, his value plummeted to zero. He wasn't just sick, he was non-productive. And once he lost his economic utility, his humanity in the eyes of his family seemed to vanish too. They saw him as a burden, a disgusting insect, rather than their son or brother who was suffering. This is such a powerful mirror to our contemporary society, isn't it? In a world that often measures worth by productivity, by what you contribute to the economy, or by your career success, what happens to those who can no longer participate in that system? What about people who are elderly, or suffer from long-term illness, or have disabilities, or lose their jobs due to economic shifts? Do we, as a society, slowly but surely begin to see them as burdens or less than if they can't fulfill a traditional productive role? Kafka, over 100 years ago, was already sounding a terrifying alarm about a society that might dehumanize individuals once they cease to be economically useful. It forces us to ask ourselves, is our value truly just tied to what we do, or is there an inherent, unconditional value to simply being a human? And how do we ensure that compassion and care don't disappear when productivity does? It's a heavy question, but one we must grapple with, especially after reading the Metamorphosis. What are your thoughts on this, everyone? Do you see parallels in our world today? That was an incredibly important discussion about how our society values those who can't work. And flowing from that, another deeply painful and universally relatable theme in the Metamorphosis is the terror of incomprehensible words, the complete breakdown of communication, and the resultant profound isolation. Imagine waking up one day and finding that no one understands you anymore. This is Gregor's horrifying reality. After his transformation, his voice changes from human speech to a series of squeaks and hisses that his family simply cannot comprehend. He tries desperately to speak, to explain, to reassure them, but all that comes out is animalistic noise. This isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a fundamental severing of his connection to humanity. This inability to communicate is terrifying for Gregor. He can hear everything his family says about him, their disgust, their frustration, their plans, but he can't respond, can't defend himself, can't express his own suffering or his lingering human thoughts. He is a prisoner not just of his body, but of his silence. This creates an unbearable psychological torment, making him utterly alone even when in the physical presence of his family. And for the family, it's equally frustrating. They can't reason with him, can't understand his needs, and can't even confirm if he's mentally still Gregor. This communication barrier quickly erodes any remaining empathy. When you can't understand someone, it's easier to objectify them, to see them as weak rather than him. The breakdown in communication leads directly to his dehumanization and ultimately, his abandonment. This theme resonates so strongly today, doesn't it? Even without a physical transformation, how many times do we feel misunderstood or fail to truly connect with those around us? Misunderstanding is, unspoken resentment is, or simply the inability to articulate our inner world can lead to profound loneliness, even in a hyper-connected world. The Metamorphosis serves as a stark reminder of how essential effective communication is to maintaining our human connections and preventing isolation. We've explored the terrifying breakdown of communication and the profound isolation Gregor experiences, which is truly heartbreaking. And that leads us to perhaps the most direct and personal question this book poses to each of us. This is a thought experiment that really hits home. What if your family member transformed? Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding someone you love, your parent, your sibling, your child, inexplicably transformed into something completely alien, something you find repulsive, something that can no longer communicate with you in a recognizable way. How would you react? Would your initial reaction be pure horror and disgust, like the Samsa family? Or would compassion immediately take over? Would you try to find a cure, relentlessly, even if it seemed hopeless? How long would your patience last if they became a complete burden, unable to contribute, consuming resources, and constantly reminding you of a life that's now shattered? And most importantly, would you still see them inside that monstrous form? Would you still see the person you love, despite the terrifying alien exterior? or would the it quickly replace the him or her? A metamorphosis forces us to confront our own humanity, our own limits of empathy, and the true nature of love and obligation. It makes us question whether our affection is conditional on appearance, productivity, or easy communication. It's a truly uncomfortable, yet essential, question to ask ourselves in this safe space. So, I genuinely want to hear from you all in the chat. If your family member transformed, what do you honestly think your first thoughts, your first actions would be? That was a truly thought-provoking discussion about what we would do if our own loved ones transformed. It forces us to look inward, doesn't it? Now, to deepen our understanding of this masterpiece, the Metamorphosis, let's turn our attention to the mind behind it, the enigmatic author, Franz Kafka. Understanding a bit about Kafka's life and personality can unlock even more layers in his stories, especially in the Metamorphosis. Franz Kafka was a German-speaking bohemian novelist and short story writer, born in Prague in 1883. His life was, in many ways, just as complicated and fraught with anxiety as the lives of his fictional characters. For most of his adult life, he worked full-time as an insurance officer, a job he found tedious and oppressive. But his true passion, his real life, was his writing, which he often pursued late into the night, after his exhausting work days. His constant struggle between his mundane, demanding job and his profound artistic calling heavily influenced his themes of alienation, bureaucracy, and the individual's powerlessness against an overwhelming system. Perhaps one of the most significant influences on Kafka's writing was his intensely difficult relationship with his overbearing and authoritarian father. This strained dynamic, full of unexpressed resentment and feelings of inadequacy, is widely believed to be a major source for the themes of guilt, punishment, and the oppressive authority figures that permeate his works. You can almost feel the weight of this father-son dynamic in Gregor's relationship with his own father in the Metamorphosis. Kafka himself was a deeply private and often melancholic man, plagued by self-doubt and loneliness. He struggled with chronic illness, social anxiety, and the feeling of being an outsider. These personal struggles are vividly reflected in his characters, who often find themselves isolated, misunderstood, and caught in absurd and nightmarish situations. Interestingly, Kafka instructed his friend Max Brauer to destroy all his unpublished manuscripts after his death. Thankfully, Brauer defied these wishes, and thanks to him, we have incredible works like The Metamorphosis, The Trial, and The Pestle. So, when you read The Metamorphosis, knowing a little about Kafka's own life, his tedious job, his difficult father, his feelings of isolation and inadequacy, it paints a much richer picture, doesn't it? It makes the anxieties and the bizarre events in the story feel even more personal and profound. It's truly amazing how an author's life can illuminate their work. Knowing about Kafka's somber yet fascinating life certainly adds a new layer to the Metamorphosis, doesn't it? And speaking of layers, this book's influence extends far beyond the literary world. It has left an indelible mark on countless films, manga, and anime, inspiring creators to explore similar themes of physical transformation, alienation, and the absurd. It's truly incredible to see how a story written over a century ago continues to resonate and inspire new forms of art. Let's talk about some examples. In film, one of the most direct and perhaps gruesome examples is David Cronenberg's 1986 film, A Fly. While the transformation is into a fly and stems from a scientific experiment rather than an unexplained phenomenon, the core themes are strikingly similar: the protagonist undergoing a horrifying physical metamorphosis, the growing repulsion from his loved ones, and the tragic loss of humanity as his body changes. The dread and isolation felt by the transforming character are very much in the spirit of Kafka. Then, venturing into the world of animation and manga, especially Japanese works, you can find a lot of Kafkaesque elements. While not always a direct transformation into an insect, the themes of body horror, surrealism, existential dread, and the individual's struggle against overwhelming, incomprehensible forces are very prevalent. Think about works like Akira, where characters undergo grotesque physical mutations that reflect internal turmoil and societal chaos. Or consider the psychological depth and sense of absolute loneliness and alienation in a series like Neon Genesis Evangelion. While the Micharos are the focus, the characters' internal struggles, their inability to connect, and their feeling of being alienated from themselves and others, distinctly echo the profound isolation Gregor experiences. Even more broadly, many psychological thrillers and horror genres in manga and anime utilize the idea of a character suddenly becoming unrecognizably other, whether physically or mentally, and the societal or familial backlash that follows. The horror often comes not just from the transformation itself, but from the brutal human response to it. What these works inherit from the Metamorphosis isn't just the literal idea of changing into a creature, but the deeper, more unsettling themes. The feeling of being misunderstood, the loss of identity when societal roles are stripped away, the terror of becoming a burden, and the chilling realization that human connections can be incredibly fragile when faced with the abnormal. It just goes to show you how universally impactful Kafka's ideas were. He tapped into a fundamental anxiety about what it means to be human, and that anxiety continues to inspire artists across different mediums and generations. It's truly a testament to the timeless power of the Metamorphosis. Wow, what an incredible journey we've had today. Thank you all so much for joining me, Mini-Koneko, on this deep dive into Franz Kafka's truly unforgettable masterpiece, The Metamorphosis. It has been such a stimulating and thought-provoking discussion, and I've loved every moment of exploring this complex work with all of you. Let's quickly recap some of the highlights from our conversation. We started by asking why the Metamorphosis feels so relevant today, touching upon its timeless themes of alienation and the human condition. Then, we laid out the unsettling plot and introduced the Samsa family, whose dynamics are just as central as Gregor's transformation. We then dove into our first big mystery, the why behind Gregor's transformation. Was it the crushing weight of overwork and societal pressure? Or perhaps a desperate, albeit tragic, form of liberation from his family's burdens? And then, the chilling idea that it might have been a self-inflicted punishment, a manifestation of his own guilt. Each theory offered such a compelling perspective, highlighting the multi-layered genius of Kafka. We meticulously traced the Samsa family's evolving reactions, from their initial shock to their heartbreaking, ultimate rejection. The discussion about whether Greggy was an angel reaching her limits or a revealed demon was particularly poignant, wasn't it? And that powerful symbol of the Father's throne echoes such a visceral representation of ultimate severance. Finally, we connected the Metamorphosis to our own society, grappling with uncomfortable questions about the value of individuals who can no longer contribute economically. The terror of communication breakdown and profound loneliness resonated so strongly, and our final thought experiment, what if your family member transformed, truly made us reflect on our own empathy. We also got to explore a bit about Kafka's own life and the incredible legacy his work has left on modern film, manga, and anime. It's clear that the Metamorphosis isn't just a story, it's a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties and societal truths. This book continues to challenge us, provoke us, and encourage us to look deeper into what it means to be human. Your insights and comments in the chat made this discussion truly special, and I'm so grateful for your active participation. Thank you all so much for spending your precious time with me today. Really had a wonderful time diving deep into the Metamorphosis with all of you. Your comments and insights were absolutely brilliant, and it truly makes these book discussions so special. It was a joy to explore such a challenging but rewarding book. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did, and perhaps even felt inspired to reread it or pick up another Kafka title. Don't forget, I stream every Saturday and Sunday at 11:00 AM for my English-speaking audience, and then again on Sunday at 10:00 PM for a Japanese language live stream. Please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave comments. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring even more bookish content to you all. Well then, that's all for today's English book discussion. I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye.